control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery, suspense, anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today we are covering a Night Gallery episode. This is Season 2, Episode 12. First aired in the US on December the 8th, 1971, and comprised of 3 different segments. Now, the 3 segments... This is possibly the best episode in terms of overall quality that we've had so far, I would say. There's slightly more memorable episodes, but there's 2 extremely strong segments. Really put it up those rankings. But it's also coupled with very short segment, which is really abysmal, possibly one of the worst ever, or probably one of the worst ever. It's pretty bad. Anyway, let's talk about the good first. The first episode was written by Rod Serling. It was an adaptation of a story by H.P. Lovecraft called Cool Air. Now, I've read the story Cool Air. It's interesting that they kind of follow the basic story, but Rod Serling swaps it around quite a bit to make it kind of a love story, which was kind of the approach that I think Alvin Sapinski did with Pickman's Model. It's very, very similar. Essentially, the original story is a man gets to know this guy that lives in a very cool room, says he's got degenerative disease, and he needs to stay cool at all times, but then his cooling machine breaks down and panic ensues. And in many respects, the Rod Serling adaptation is much the same. It's just he swaps some of the characters around. Instead of it being a friendship between 2 men, it's between a woman played by Barbara Rush, who goes to visit her father's late colleague, played by Henry Darrow, Dr. Munoz, a Spanish chap. She kind of starts to fall for him, so it's kind of a love story, but he cannot stand warmth, and he's always icy to the touch, so it's kind of odd. And in essence, it's in many respects the same as the written story, in that they have a relationship and it develops and they like each other's company, but ultimately his machine that cools him down breaks down, and he kind of starts to panic. He demands more ice, much like the written story. While the woman tries to assist, and it goes on from there. And it's extremely well filmed, directed by Janelle Schwartz, who made a lot of really good Night Gallery episodes. He's quite a good director. The thing I know him most for is Jaws 2, which is a little unfortunate because he's kind of quite talented. And I have to say, it's a great turn by Barbara Rush. She's very effervescent, and she really acts with a little underplaying, but really well. In this, and the relationship between the 2 is kind of interesting. There's also like a comedy landlady character too, which is fine. But ultimately, this is an old story, so I'm going to reveal. Ultimately, this man is dead, but is self-preserving. He has some sort of mechanism to keep himself alive as long as he stays cool. Once he gets warmer, organs start to degenerate, and it's irreversible process when such a generation has happened. So he's always tries to keep cool. And his machine breaks down, he demands ice, but ultimately they can't fix the machine in time. And what we end up with in the Night Gallery story is a rotten corpse. And you kind of get that in the Lovecraft story too, though in that it's almost like a disintegration into slime in that. And in the written story, we find out he died 10 years previously when his wife died. In this, it's similar, and it kind of ends with a quite interesting headstone where we see a much older Barbara Rush visiting his grave, and we see born so-and-so, died so-and-so, and so-and-so 10 years later. So it's kind of interesting. His headstone has his 2 different deaths. I really strong recommend. This episode 12 of season 2 is a really good one, and this is a really good, really solid sort of take on the material. Rod Serling adapted it really well to make it much more human, whereas in the written story it's kind of clinical, which is a thing with Lovecraft, right? He's all about getting to the end, the final shock. Rod Serling is much more interested in character, so there is that. Okay, that brings us to the next segment, which is called Camera Obscura. Camera obscura is a term for a certain type of lens setup so you can see over a whole town. I've seen it in a film called Matter of Life and Death, a camera obscura. It's a Victorian device. It's kind of a prototype camera, but it's often used to mean this sort of lens that can see a whole village or, a street or something like that. And this one, again, is written by Rod Serling, and it's got 2 main stars. It's got several people in it, but the 2 main ones are Ross Martin, probably most famous for being the character who's always wearing disguises in the Wild Wild West. The sidekick of the main guy in the Wild Wild West. And René Auberjonois, who is probably best known for playing Odo in Deep Space Nine, but he's a very strong character actor who appears in so many, many different things. Now, this was interesting because it's set in London. I'd say it might be Victorian. It's late Victorian if it is. We're basically a young moneylender who's played by René Auberjonois goes to collect on a debt, and he's met by Ross Martin. Ross Martin in a disguise, dressed up, I should say. Looks like a Mark Twain outfit, really. And actually, it's very electric. Ross Martin really delivers. He's overacting a little, but it's very, very fun. They're both doing British accents. René Auberjonois' kind of a London, almost Cockney accent, but and again the accents are fine. I come from London. I was fine with their accents. I thought they were fine. And this segment was directed by John Badham. He directed many films. For example, Frank Langella's Dracula is one of his. For example. Now, again, written by Rod Serling, but adapted from a short story, this time by Basil Copper, which I've not read. And essentially, the moneylender goes to see this older man about some money is owed. But this older man keeps bringing up clients who come to unfortunate ends because they owed him money, usually suicide or whatever. He keeps bringing them up, and the moneylender's like, that's no concern of mine. My concern is business. It's very Scrooge. It's like a young Scrooge. It's definitely a Scrooge story. That's basically what's going on here. Instead of being visited by Marley and the ghosts, something else happens to make him realise his bad ways. So essentially, this camera obscura, he sees like a weird the village, but then he sees another camera obscura that kind of looks on a greenish kind of town that he seems familiar. But when he leaves in disgust in the end. But when he leaves, he's in this weird green place, and he keeps seeing people that he knows are dead. And like bad people, and they say things like, "This is where you will stay if you giving your ways," and all this. So it's like Scrooge, but no redemption in this, man. He's he's in hell basically. Again, really good segment. Really, really like this. It's one to be seen. You will enjoy it greatly. Both the episodes I've discussed so far, both the segments I've discussed so far, are really, really well acted and directed and written. So this is a very solid pair of stories. Big recommend. Season 2, episode 12 might be the best episode. I still really love the pilot, but I think this is a very, very solid turn. And it's interesting how similar Cool Air is to the one just before it, another one adapted from Lovecraft, which is Pickman's Model, but not written by Rod Serling, interestingly, right? So, how about that? Right, the third segment is absolutely terrible. I've discussed how bad some of these very short segments are. I mean, the one with Leslie Nielsen was a good one. That was the only good one I've seen. The only really, that's really good. The others go from goofy to silly. This one's not even that. It doesn't even reach for that. It stars Marty Allen, the comedian Marty Allen, dressed up as Edgar Allan Poe, trying to write The Raven, and he goes, and it's obviously it's a dark and stormy night at his desk, and he's trying to write, and he goes, once upon a midnight weary, a midnight clearly, a wandered weak hand, and he's like, oh, it's obviously got, writer's block, and then a raven goes, weary, you fool, things like that, and he throws something at the raven, and that's it. That is literally it. He throws a thing at a raven that's prompting him for the next line on his famous poem. I don't know what the point of this one was. I think if they'd have made one of the other stories a minute longer and cut this, it would have been a pretty much perfect episode. But unfortunately, this one tags on. This one just serves to remind you how good the other ones are. Directed by Jeff Corey, written by Jack Laird. Jack Laird I think Jack Laird was the only one that wrote these tiny little short segments. He just wrote them to fill time or something. I really, really thought this was poor. It was a terrible one. However, don't let that put you off the episode. Cool Air and Camera Obscura are excellent segments. Absolutely great. Really, really enjoyed this episode, and it's a strong recommend from me. Okay, I'm going to wind it up there, but before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to